Okay, I think it's time we can start. Thank you for joining this session of the virtual seminars in economic theory. We are very glad to see all of you after the summer break. Today we have Eyal Winter from Lancaster&Hebrew University, who is going to give a presentation on stars and galaxies, exploiting social influence in networks. We are very pleased to have Eyal's co-author, Vlad Nora from Nazarbayev University, and two guest panelists, Sanjeev Goyal from Cambridge and Fernando Vega Redondo from Bocconi. The format of the seminars is as follows. We have a 60-minute presentation with time for interim questions from the panelists. This is followed by a 15-minute session for questions and discussions after that. We request all attendees to keep your microphones muted during the talk. However, please post comments and questions in the chat. Vlad will answer clarifying questions in writing and may answer more substantive ones live. There will be another opportunity to ask questions live in the Q&A sessions at the end. The talk is recorded. Before I hand over to Eyal, let me remind you that these seminars take place every Thursday at 4 p.m. UK time. Next week, we will have with us Rene Bowen from San Diego presenting Agenda Setter Power Dynamics, Learning in Multi-Issue Bargaining. As usual, you can find more information about coming list of speakers on our websites or following us on Twitter. Thank you, Eyal. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Max. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the audience and particularly for Fernando and Sanjeev, who were willing to agree to moderate it. You have here two #1 experts in network theory. They can explain you whatever I'm not able to. But, and of course, for Vlad, who is my co-author here, and is also present in this seminar, okay? So let me start by telling you things that you already know, and then hopefully a few things that you don't know. What you already know is that we are swayed by friends, not only by friends, by colleagues, by lifestyle bloggers, by people we interacting with, and people that we interact with without actually seeing them, like those we interact with right now, virtually, online, okay? There's nice evidence by the Institute of Public Relations that identifies social media influence as in enormous way. 40% are making decisions very much based on social media. For travel, 25 for financial services decision, retail 22, and healthcare 21. So these are numbers for consumption, but obviously social media affect our decision making in all sorts of life, including politics, I don't know, social aspect, our values, okay, religion, name it, okay? Much of these social influence is done through well-known social platforms, and I'm referring to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Many of these, the big ones are the ones that, these 4 ones that we know, but there are many smaller ones. And whatever I'm saying here would apply both to the big ones and to the small one, okay? Now, what we wanted to do is to ask the following question, okay? These platforms obviously have an interest to have control on people's decision-making, okay? One reason they have such interest is because they are living out of social influence. They're living out of driving people to act in a certain way, because eventually they're making the revenue from companies that advertise them. And these companies need to influence people, right? To buy the products, okay? And the easiest the platform is for the purpose of influencing people, the better it is for them, okay? And then we ask ourselves, okay, what does it impose on the kind of mechanisms that, given a certain network, will induce people to take the action that either the platform wants them to take, or some clients that the platform is working on behalf, like an advertiser wants them to take, okay? So, so we first asked the question, given a mechanism, how would the optimal contract look like? The optimal contract means we want to incentivize people, and to incentivize them, one interpretation on how you incentivize them is you just transfer them money. Okay, this is one way of incentivizing them. But a more broad interpretation of incentivizing individuals is just investing intensively in advertising earmarked that an individual will take the particular action that the platform or the client wants to take. For instance, buy, I don't know, Coca-Cola, okay? Vote for Trump, okay? Any decision which is relevant, okay? So that was the first question, for which we used contract theory. And then we asked the broader question, which is the main question. And the main question is, what sort of architectures of network would make it the easiest, would facilitate exploiting social influence? Namely, under what sort of architecture will allow the platform to control the decisions of its users, and I'm distinguishing between users and clients. It occurred to me that I don't know if you saw Social Dilemma. Okay, one very nice comment that they mentioned there about the word users is that there are only two markets in which clients are called users: drugs and social media. If you think about it, this is true. Only drugs and social, the rest are called, you know, drivers, consumers, whatever. So I'm distinguishing between users and clients. So what are the structure? What are the architectural structure that will facilitate the most accommodative to exploiting social influence? And I said most accommodative. There will be formal definition for all of these. Okay, but roughly speaking, not yet the model. We're talking about a principal who wants to agents to act. For instance, self-isolate during Corona. He can spend resources to convince them, targeted education, campaign, restriction, paying money, transfer, whatever. And the question is, how intensively would the principal target each individual depending on where he is located or she is located in the network? And secondly, which networks are more susceptible to develop social influence? Okay, and there is, so basically what we did here to some extent is matching the literature on networks with the literature on contract theory. So there are a bunch of papers that involve here social network, including, I think, two of Sanjeev. There are papers that talk about viral marketing, which is connected, but it has a completely different approach in strategic diffusion. Mechanism design, this is the area I've been working on in the last several years, and I've been using some of the technique that I used in my AER paper in 2004 and my very recent paper with Marina Halak and Ilan Kremer in AER in this that appeared just several weeks ago. And of course, related papers to ours is again AER paper with Marina with Lipovsky and Rappaport that that actually extend my 2004 paper. They are the basic idea there is kicking into the contract part of the paper, but the contract part of the paper is the minor part. The more important part, optimizing over the network structure. Okay, and there are very little. There are not many papers that do something like that. I named some of them. This one with Fernando, and is about optimizing the structure. I guess the structure of the network for the purpose of cheap search, right? So there are some papers, but not many. These papers are mainly, as far as we know, they are not addressing the issue of optimizing the network for the purpose of maximizing the social influence in order to be able to control people's decision very intensively, okay? So here is a more formal model. So we're talking about an individuals in a social network. And we use the standard notation of Gij being 1, meaning that there is a link between player I and player J, and 0 if there is no link. And then what we do is introduce a utility function that captures this very first sentence that I started my talk with, okay? People are influenced by friends, okay? And if they are Facebook friends, they are influenced by Facebook friends, okay? So what we are assuming is that there is a utility function for performing the action, whatever the action is, which is combined of two aspects: the intrinsic value or cost of doing the action, the transfer that you're getting from the principal, plus, and this is the most important aspect, the social influence, okay? And now if we look at the social influence, forget this FDI for a moment, what we have here, when Xi is 1 when player I is taking the action and 0 when he's not taking an action, what we have here is simply, for I, this is the sum of players who are his friends in the network who took the action, okay? So the more players, the more friends you have who took the action, the more you are eager to take the action as well, okay? The FDI is what we call a dilution factor, okay? Of course, if I have only one friend who takes the action, and I know that I have only one friend and I observe that he took the action, that's gonna be very different than when I have 20 friends or 2,000 friends and I realize the only one of them is taking the action, okay? It's much less, the influence of the second one is much lower, right? So basically one very basic intuition for this FDI is when you divide this number by the number of friends that you have. And then this expression is simply the proportion of your friends who are taking the action. But it doesn't have to be a proportion. And indeed, what we are going to do is impose directly condition on FDI for whatever results that we want, okay? But what we of course maintain already is that it's declining. The more, it's declining. The more people, the more friends you have, the influence of each of them is going to be smaller. Okay. Okay, so now we are focusing more on these social influences, weakly decreasing function, a dilution, social influence. Someone with many friends is swayed less by each of them. And this is just a very trivial example where we have, I here have 3 friends, you have 2 friends here, and you have 4 friends here. Here, only one is taking the action. Here, also only one is taking the action. And here, 2 of them are taking the action. Okay, so these 2 are comparable, okay? And the effect of this one here is smaller than the effect of this one here, okay? On this one is at this stage is not comparable with these 2 others. Okay, now what's next? Given a social network G and an influence mechanism, we are going to define a game, okay? Influence mechanism is just the rewards that each individual is getting if he or she is performing the action, okay? So this is a mechanism. The game that player face is it just has 2 strategies for each player: take the action or avoid taking the action. And we are going to call this vector T an incentive inducing mechanism, okay? If the vector of ones, namely everybody takes the action, is a unique Nash equilibrium of the game induced by this mechanism, okay? If you have a question in the middle, anyone that here on the platform, this is the good platform, not the bad one that I'm talking about. Please don't worry about disturbing me. Okay. So now what are we looking for? We are looking for the T star, which is the optimal, namely the cheapest among all the I and I mechanisms. Okay. So again, what do we have here? Let me just finish these slides. And a network is optimal if there is no other network in which the principal, there is something that is popping out every time about somebody who's entered the room. Is there a way for me to, never mind, okay.
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't worry. We admit everyone who's coming.
No. The reason is that it sheds my slides. So the problem is that it pops up on my screen in a way that sheds the slides, and so I'm not able to read it. But but it vanishes in a second. So I'm not worrying about it. So a network is optimal if there is no other network where the principal can induce a unique equilibrium where everybody is taking the action at a lower total reward. Total reward means at a lower total cost for the principal himself, okay? So let me go over the model.
Can I ask some questions?
Yes, Sanjeev.
So just trying to understand a little bit the slide. I would have thought that, there is some objective function for the planner or the outside principal, and it would be sort of smooth, right? So, it probably wants to get more effort, and that's good. And
Yeah, that's a good
paying
point.
people money T is bad. So is that a special case of what you're doing, or?
Yeah, to some extent. This is also, this is a good question that refer to other paper I mentioned in the contract theory. So what Sanjeev is asking is that why am I interested in incentivizing all of them to take the action? Maybe it's too expensive for me. Maybe taking the action might generate a certain revenue, and I want only half of them to take the action. So I want to maximize net profit to some extent, right? Is that what you are asking?
Yeah, so I'm sort of wondering if, yeah,
Okay.
and that would be the more natural way to think about it. No?
So the answer to this is that there are basically two stages to this mechanism design process. One in which you designated the agent that you want to take the action, okay? After you designated them, you ask yourself, what's the cost of inducing them to take the action? And then you have to solve another optimization problem where you say, okay, now which set of agent I want to induce to take the action? And in this preliminary optimization problem, that by the way is NP hard, it's not easy to solve, right? In this preliminary optimization problem, you take into account the cost and the benefit of each of inducing each set of players. Okay, but now you know one sufficient condition here is that let's assume that that any additional agent that takes the action has an enormous, a very high benefit for the principal, in which case the optimization would be by inducing everybody to take the action.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, can I ask a
Yes.
quick clarifying
Go ahead.
question?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you know, typically design problems have multiple equilibrium problems. You are essentially killing it off by definition. That is, you want.
Yes, I'm taking a unique. I'm attempting to implement a unique Nash equilibrium.
Okay, so we'll wait for the results, but does that mean this becomes harder to characterize, or?
Let me make a honest statement. It makes it more interesting to characterize. Okay. There are so many things that, and this applies to all other contracting paper that I cited a few minutes ago, right? And we have a lengthy discussion both on our paper and my previous papers about also why is it that unique implementation might be necessary. So one of the things, apart from the fact that it makes things more interesting, there is, we are talking about situation of strategic uncertainty or strategic risk. So maybe all of us won't take the action because we suspect the other people won't take the action. The same kind of problem that occur in bank run and things like that, right? So there's a strategic risk problem, okay? Now there's when you have strategic risk, you also have multiple equilibria. And there are several experimental, very nice experimental paper that show that in such situations, what people are going to do is if you are optimistic, you're going to be screwed up. Okay, so you'd rather not be optimistic, because what they'll do, they will choose the equilibrium that is sustained by their pessimistic beliefs. Okay, and hence they would go to the bad equilibrium from your perspective. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now what we do, we are going to look at several different types of utility function and try to solve it. Okay, so the first one we are going to do, and I'm going to give it by means of example, is one that involves both basically per friend benefit and the average benefit. Okay, so look at this. This is alpha over 1 over dj. This is the FD. Okay, which means that when alpha is 0 is just the proportion of people that take my action, that right? And if alpha is infinity, then I don't care about how many friends I have. I just count the number of people who are taking the action. Okay, and when alpha is somewhere between infinity and 0, it's sort of a combination of the two. I give a certain weight to every friend that is taking an action, but I'm also looking to some extent at the number of friends that I have. Okay, so let us start with this example. Okay, we have a graph here. Okay, we have 3 graphs here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to attempt to find the optimal among them. Okay, find the optimal network. Okay. But in order to do this, I have to, for each one of them, I have to solve what's the optimal mechanism, okay? So for that, I'll have to design the optimal mechanism. So now, I'll give you some hints about how this optimal mechanism should look, okay? So first of all, the very basic insight is that I have to pay one agent so that it's worthwhile for him to take the action, even if he believes that he's only one who is going to do so, right? If I pay everybody less than that, there will be an equilibrium in which all of them avoid taking the action. So there must be one that is induced by means of a dominant strategy, okay? And let's call this player 1, okay? Now, after I induce this player, so I'm giving him C. So what am I giving him? I'm giving him, just reimburse him for the cost of taking the action. Once I induce player 1 to take the action, and bear in mind that everybody will know basically how much I'm paying each of them, okay? Once I am inducing player 1 to take the action, player 2 now knows that his friend is taking the action, okay? So I can extract alpha minus 1/3 from player 2, okay? So I have to pay player 2 somewhat less to make him indifferent between taking an action or not. When 2 is induced already to take the action, I'm now can go to player 3 and extract something for player 3 as well. So I'm extracting, sorry. So this is at least one of the player have to be offered this. So this is player 2. So where one, so now we know that 1 or 2 are acting. And now it's enough that I pay player 3 that much. I'm extracting now the fact that he knows that there are already 3 people who are taking the action. And I'm doing the same with player 4. So that's what I'm paying for them. Okay. And depending on the order, one is treated better than the other. Okay. Because I assumed everybody is the same. So there is no, you see here, there's also a symmetric graph. So there's no issue about who you start with. There is going to be a big issue later on. So how much I'm going to pay here? I'm going to pay in total 4C minus 6 alpha minus 2. Okay. Now let's look at this graph, okay? This graph again, I need to induce somebody to have a dominant strategy, okay? It makes sense, and I'm telling you it makes it, so not only makes sense, this can be proved that it's better to start with the one who has the highest degree, which is either 1 or 2, okay? Why is it the case? Because once you induce him, there are going to be 3 people that will benefit out of the fact that he's already taking the action, and you will be able to extract these benefit from these individuals 3 times, okay? Inducing him as in a dominant strategy involves the same cost of inducing anybody else in a dominant strategy, but the benefits that you will gain later when fixing the payoffs for the other, due to the fact that he's already known to take the action, is going to be much higher because he is influencing 3 individuals, okay? So I'm paying him C, okay? I'm paying, now the other players that after paying him, I can extract from player 2 the cost that, the benefit that he has from player 1 taking the action. And then I can design the payoffs for 4 and 3, okay? In doing so, they will take into account that 1 and 2 have already made a decision to take the action, okay? So I can extract quite a bit from each of them due to the fact that each of these 2 players are already known to take the action because they were induced with a dominant strategy, okay? And this comes up to be 4C minus 5 alpha minus 7.3. This is the optimal mechanism.
Yeah,
see,
can I interrupt?
The most, this gets a second, and these 2 get identical because they can rely on these 2 to have made the action. A question?
Yes, I have a question. You appeal here to some kind of iterative process, reasoning, but just to clarify, the model is static.
The model is static. There is no sequence of action.
Right.
Well, what I'm building here, I'm building a mechanism which yield a dominant solvable game, okay? The game that the mechanism induces is solved by iterative elimination of dominated strategies.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. This is the question. We can do now the same exercise here. Here, of course, we start with player 1, but this we call a star, right? This we call a star. Not only that's a star. And the fact that we induced him, that allow us to cut a little bit from each of the other costs. Okay? Now, what is the optimal graph? Well, it turns out that for certain values of alpha, when alpha is lower than 1/3, the star is optimal. When alpha is more than 1/3, is a complete. It's the complete graph. Okay. Okay, and this figure is not a coincidence. We can show that for this type, of utility function that I started with, okay, this one, okay, we have what we call a bank-bank solution. Okay, what is a bank-bank solution? Basically, the optimal graph will be either a star or a complete graph. Okay, it has to be connected. You cannot have something less than a star in terms of intensity of links. It has to be connected. The minimum is a star, and the maximum is a complete graph, and that depends on the alpha. Okay, now of course one dares to ask whether this is the case generally. So now I'm going to give you another example. I think is somewhat more interesting, which is or before that, okay, I looked at only 3 graphs here. That's the 3 graph I started with, but this is not an exhausting description of all the architectures that are relevant. These are another 3 architectures, okay? None of these will ever be optimal for no matter what alpha is. Basically, among these 3 architectures, only the star and the complete graph can arise as optimal stars, as optimal structures, okay? But now let's think about a different model or a different utility function, okay? So think about the following quite reasonable utility function, which is based on a model of influence, okay? So an agent is influenced by K out of her N friends, once by each, okay? So you have N friends and you randomly meet K of them, okay? And you register the opinion of each of your K friends. Is it Bush or not? Sorry, is it Trump or not? You see, I'm back in the 80s. But if you meet the same guy twice, then you don't register it once because it's the same person. I know you are Trump. You have already told me that, okay? So what I'm doing a sampling with replacement of K greater than 1 among my friends, okay? And this determines the amount of attraction that arises in me in terms of taking the action as a function of the behavior of my other friends. More formally, it boils down to this F function, okay? It's easy to show it. I'm not going to do it, okay? It's a very simple probabilistic model that shows that this is, okay? Okay, so you are influenced randomly by some of your friends and then determine, you look at the expected number, of people through this random meeting, the expected number of friends that you meet and have and took this action. Okay, if K equal 1, it's the average influence model, because you just pick up one of your friend, and that would mean the probability 1 over the number of friends he's going to take the action, okay? With K equal infinity, you get the constant interaction benefit model. And now we can ask the same question regarding these 6 architecture. And the answer that we come up with is that now neither the complete graph nor the star will be optimal. There will be actually only one graph that will be optimal, only one network, and this is this network, okay? So it's somewhere between these 2, okay? Now, what is this network, okay? So this is only an example. So now I have to put the flesh over the bones and direct you to a result that we can prove, that we actually proved, okay? So for this, we shall show that for F satisfying a natural assumption, only top networks can be optimal, okay? These, okay? These will never be optimal under our assumptions, okay? Among these 3, I showed you one utility function where these 2 extreme ones could be optimal, and then I showed you another utility function in which this one is optimal, okay? So one preliminary result that is born by the type of mechanism, by type of contract theory that we are using, I'm allowing you not to concentrate on the graph. I'm going to explain it to you, okay? When we look at an optimal mechanism, okay, it has to arise from this procedure that I described to you, by which I design the payoffs to yield a game which is dominant solvable. So there is a lemma that says, whatever the graph is, okay, the optimal mechanism is going to look as follows. I first designate a player for whom I'm making it a dominant strategy to take the action. Then I'm designating a second agent for whom I'm making it a dominant strategy to take the action, assuming that the first one did so already, and so forth and so on. This is exactly the same algorithm that I followed in the example that I showed you, okay? So this is a lemma, okay? If you believe this lemma, then the only issue here is who you designate to be the first, who you designate to be the second, and so forth. What is the optimal order for a fixed graph? You fix now the network and you ask, okay, the optimal mechanism has to use this dominant solvable payoffs, okay? But what should be the order by which this dominant solvability will be conducted, okay? And this is, so this is the lemma that I said. In an influence mechanism T1, Tn is tight, namely, you cannot find something that will improve, okay? You will be able to increase somebody's payoff without reducing somebody's else. You cannot reduce somebody's payoff without increasing somebody else's payoff, okay? And the issue is the permutation. What sort of permutation? And okay, so a permutation. So in order to tell you what the permutation has to be, okay, so basically I'll say it first of all in words without formalism. Basically, you go according to the degree of these players. You start with a player which has the highest degree. You give him a dominant strategy. Then you look at those at one of the players who have was second in the order of degree. You induce him to have a dominant strategy, assuming the first one is already known to take the action, and so forth. Okay. So if we look at this example that I showed you here, okay, okay, this was part of the example that I showed you. I said, I'm starting with one, okay, the one has 2 degrees. The degree of one is 2. Sorry, I'm starting with 2. The 2 has the highest degree because it's 3. 1 has 2, 4 has 2, and 3 has 1. So I'm starting with 2. Then the ones that have 2 degrees can be selected arbitrarily. So I can continue either with 1 or with 4, and only then do 3, okay? So the 2 optimal orders are either 2, 1, 4, and 3, or 2, 4, 1, and 3, okay? The only ambiguity that we have is whether we put 1 before 4 or we put 4 before 1. Okay, the cost for the principal will be the same under these 2 permutations. Okay, proposition: an influence mechanism is optimal if the corresponding permutation of elimination of dominated strategy is non-increasing permutation. Namely, you start with the one with the highest degree and move downwards, okay? And the intuition for that is pretty clear. Let me try to give you the information, the intuition. When supposed here, it's written here, principal exploit the influence on I from popular friends, okay? When I have if I have an I which is more popular than J, okay, in the sense that he has more friends, okay, starting with I will allow me to subtract the benefits from a larger group than when I start from J. Okay, so the proof is basically by means of contradiction. Suppose that this is not the case, and I take one, I promote one which has a lower degree. Then by flipping these two, reversing the order, I can decrease the principal total cost. Okay, it's quite intuitive. Okay, and this is basically the thing that explains it. Okay, what it means is that people with high degree, and this is the first conceptual intuition, people, which is not surprising, people with high degree, I'm going to call them influencers or star or whatever you want, people who are connected to many people, they get preferential treatments over those who are connected with very few. Okay, very, very reasonable, not surprising. Now come the more tricky part, and I don't want to have too much time for that, but now it's the question of...
question.
Yes.
So, so if you go back to this, there seems to be some, so one might have thought that, so the way you were explaining it, it seems to suggest that I'm going to start with the guy with the highest degree.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, so it may be the specific problem you're looking at, but, you know, often, you know, that sort of degree centrality, but often, so let's try to understand the structure of the problem, because it seems that in many settings, what you're interested in is not the highest degree guy, but the guy who's connected to many highly connected folks, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see.
So why is that not an issue at all here?
I'll explain. Okay. So what view says, Sanjeev, that suppose player 3, although he is connected only to 2 here, he has, let me think, he's connected to maybe another one directly, and then this other, let's call it number 5, and this other player number 5 is connected to a bunch of many others.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's a friend of a superstar.
Yes.
Why would he benefit from being a friend of a superstar, right? And the reason why he won't benefit from that is that all the benefit of those many players to which number 6 is connected, okay, will be acquired by 6 himself. Okay, and so it's worthwhile to make 6 the first. And if the 6 is the first, then who is 3? 3 is just somebody who is connected to one player down the road. You see? So indeed, what we have here, which is not that makes it to some extent simpler from the point of view of computation, is that we don't have to look at the entire graph to determine who is the ranking of these individuals in terms of the way they are treated by the mechanism. Okay, degree centrality is the only thing that matter. Okay, but now I'm going to talk about.
So, Eyal, I mean, as a follow-up on this question of Sanjeev, I guess that if the problem was to select just one guy that you could pay, and you were interested in how the extent of spillovers that it generates by himself, probably only producing a subset of individuals switching to action one, then in an equilibrium, okay, in a corresponding equilibrium, then perhaps considerations more global than degree centrality, that is the notions of centrality that Sanjeev was alluding to, would be the fundamental ones that we would like to look.
So under which condition you are referring to, Fernando?
So, suppose that you are just given the option of paying one or a certain number, but not necessarily all of the individuals.
So I'm constrained to pay only one of them.
For example, suppose just one, okay?
Then I guess you are right, yes.
Yes, okay, so that is the...
Then I want to perhaps generate a big change, so I'll start with...
Exactly.
But what I think will be the case is, suppose that I allowed to pay only 3. Among these 3, so I will probably take part of the network which is quite dense for these 3 individuals, but among these 3, again, degree centrality will be the criterion. I'm suspecting. I'm not. We haven't looked at it in.
Yes, that's right. Relative to the number of individuals that you are going to pay, I think that your intuition. I mean, that's my intuition as well.
Yeah. So now I'm going to show you the 3 conditions that we need. Okay. One of them is benefit, and this is the most clear and unproblematic condition. It says that although adding a friend to your group of friends may reduce the influence, okay, it will never reduce an influence when the additional friend is taking the action. Right? So if you have a certain number of friends, some of them take the action and some of them don't take the action. If you introduce another agent, another friend to your circle, to the friendship circle, then indeed, if this additional friend is not taking the action, it will reduce the overall influence. Okay? But if he's taking the action, it will increase, or at least it won't reduce the influence. Note that the average, all the examples that I gave, all the utility functions that I gave, selecting randomly friends or the average number of friends who take the action, they all satisfy this condition. Okay. The other condition is convexity, and convexity says that if I look at the dilution, okay, the dilution is high when I have a small number of friends, and is lower when we have a higher number of friends. Okay, so the way you should think of it is the following. So suppose I'm telling you, you have now 20 friends in your circle, and I'm telling you you have 20 friends, and now you have I'm introducing another friend to you. Unfortunately, he's not taking the action. Okay, so your influence will decline. It will decline in a certain degree. If I tell you, if you had 1,000 friends and I add an additional friend that doesn't take the action, it will affect your dilution only marginally, right? Because you'll say, okay, I have I have so many friends that, and you just introduce another one, this will affect it less than when I have a small number of friends and I'm introducing another one. Okay. So this is about fixing K, right? So I have K out. So the difference is I know that I have 20 friends and 10 of them are taking the action, as opposed to have 1,000 friends, 10 of them are taking the action. But now there is another friend that I have which doesn't take the action. It's negligible. Okay. The third one is just a strengthening, a slight strengthening of the first one. What we need is that there will be some bound on this convexity, that will be, I would say, not too close to a linear function. The dilution should not be too close to a linear function. So what I do is multiply the right-hand side of the inequality by 1 plus 1 over n over 2, okay? When n goes to infinity, this is just convexity, okay? But it says, when n is big, which is the relevant thing, is very, very close to convexity. We may not need this part, but we could not prove the result without it, okay? Tough love, okay? So what we found is that under these three conditions, only these three conditions, only this type of networks can be optimal. And these type of networks are connected to the concept of, but Fernando, we talked about it in Lancaster, hub and spoke, right?
Yes, core periphery networks, no?
Core periphery, okay? But we looked at but some of the paper you mentioned and also the rest of the literature, none of them designated exactly this structure.
Mm-hmm.
Because core periphery refer to basically a set of architectures, not a specific one. Mm-hmm. This is very specific. And what it says is the following. We call it a galaxy, and a galaxy is the following. A galaxy partitions a set of nodes into two sets. One of them is called stars. The other one is called periphery. And the properties of these two sets is that the stars are connected between themselves and connected to all of the other nodes. So the stars are connected with everybody. The periphery is only connected with the stars. No periphery player is connected with any other periphery player, okay? So the way you should think about it is, it's better to think about it in a three-dimensional picture. So there are three stars over there, and each of them has link to all, these are the influencers. The stars in the conceptual sense, in terms of popularity, they are connected to everybody else. And those people just get messages, are being only influenced by stars. And this is my worry. This is really my worry that that's where we are going in terms of the structure of social media today. Because there's no doubt, by the way, since I started distributing the paper, I had, I've been contacted by Ofcom, which is the UK regulator of the internet, and also by the FCC, and also by Facebook itself. So apparently Ofcom is working precisely on this type of concerns. Perhaps not because of the reasons that I bring here, but the concern is that most of the influence in the network will be carried out by a small group of agents. That's something like a cartel in the market of ideas and expression.
But
okay?
Here, I mean, this core periphery of galaxy that you call, I mean, here the key consideration for what is concerning you is what is the size of the core relative
What
to...
is the size of the core?
Because
and we have a result we have a result for this direction. I'm almost, how long do I have on still, Max?
We are slowly moving to a discussion, I can see.
So I won't
but
be able
there is
to,
a certain point, a conclusion slide.
We have a result that shows the more flat the f function is, the flatter it is. Okay, the function is flatter than the function a. Okay, so we have a result that says if f is flatter than h, then the number of stars under f is going to be greater than the number of stars of f. So we are concerned about cases in which f is not flat, but it's very convexly declining.
But sorry,
okay?
I think.
And then you have a small number of stars. You have a small number of stars, and it means that that influence is being exercised by a small number of people.
Yes, I think. I would rather talk about core and periphery. I think the notion of stars, I find it confusing. It is really the more dilution is at work, no? The more concentrated the core you want it to be, and the less dilution, the larger. No, I think that is the.
Yes.
Because after all, it's the relative size of the core. That is really,
it's the relative size is the relative size of the core from the entire population.
Exactly.
And what it depends on the flatness of the dilution function.
Exactly.
Okay, Eyal, if you can slowly wrap up, and then we can give a chance to other people also ask
so
questions.
Let me just, there is, I'm going to, there are more things, but less important, I would say. I'll make two remarks. One remark is that, so we have also results about what happens without the last condition, which is strict, or some sort of strong convexity. And then we have, we can show that what we get as optimal networks are what we call K-cluster galaxy. K-cluster galaxy means that you have a core, a set of stars, and then you have several peripheries. What do I mean several peripheries? In each periphery, each node is connected, of course, to the star, but to all other peripheries, to all agents in other peripheries, but not within. There is no connection within each periphery, right? So this is the structure when we remove. But again, this would happen it's quite irrelevant for large networks like Facebook or LinkedIn, because in large network, condition 3 is not binding. It's basically satisfied, okay? What else do I have here? One might ask, how do network platform can control? We tend to think when we are on Facebook that we decide about our friends. It's our decision. They give us an impression that it's your own decision. But in fact, there are two instruments that Facebook uses that allows them to very chirurgically, very smartly decide about the structure of the network. One is through the news feed. They decide whose post will be seen by whom. So if you're not seeing, Fernando, my post, it's as if, and I'm not seeing although we have a link, okay? Although we have a link, this link is not effective, okay? So this is the way by which it can serve links that are not optimal, okay? Just not letting information flow between you and me. The other thing that it can affect the network by means of introducing link is through what they call friend suggestion, right? You know, it's not necessarily, but they will design that friend suggestion also partly in terms of this consideration of how will it contribute to their ability to control decisions over the network, okay? LinkedIn has this concept. This is amazing. They have this concept of influencer. These are people that are already quite famous, and they don't need this status of influencer, but they get for free from LinkedIn this advantage of having their post beyond what the public ask for these posts. That this influencer will be even more central than what their own popularity yield them, right? So it's boosting a star, right? So obviously, because you have a limited attention over this social network, when you make one agent very, very intense in terms of the number of people he can affect or can have contact with for his post, for the information that he transmits, the attention to other is declining, okay? And lastly, Instagram is all about influencers, okay? Most of the advertising activity is done through famous people, okay? And these are not famous people like being a famous academic or not even famous singers. You know, a very nice example is Kylie Jenner. I don't know if you heard this name. I haven't heard it before I looked it up online. She became famous in 2017 just by participating in one of the reality shows in the United States. And now she charges $1 million for a post endorsing the product, right? So obviously this actually cleans away all the opportunities for other individuals that are not famous, initially are not famous, to have some influence. Not by sending a message to family members, but saying something generally that might interest the public as a whole. Thank you. I'll stop here. I'm starting a little bit.
Thank you very much. So the plan is that we are going to stop recording 1:15, wherever you are. In UK, it's 5 o'clock. But we'll devote the remaining time for questions, and then we can stay and you'll have a chance to ask questions if there are remaining questions. Can I start with Fernando and Sanjeev, if you have any additional comments or questions?
Yeah, maybe I can make a couple of remarks here. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think what I'll do is, in the interest of time, I'll probably send you some more comments and some references. So I basically agree with Fernando that it might actually be easier to refer to these galaxies in terms of core periphery, because a number of people have actually used core periphery to describe these kinds of networks. So I'll send you a reference, a couple of references.
Very good.
I wanted to go back a little bit to a couple of points about the way you've set up your model. So if you were to think about the basic payoff function you're looking at, it's sort of your utility for is sort of it's a function of the action I choose. There's a cost to the action, but also there's a complementarity with the actions of my friends. Now, if I were to take this f function as linear, okay, just to fix ideas, then that problem, when you solve it, you're going to get, you can characterize the Nash equilibrium in terms of what is known as the Q core of the network. And I thought that, so a couple of points. First of all,
what is made linear again, Sanjeev?
the f function.
The f function. Okay.
If it's just made linear, so or you just normalize it to 1. Okay, so
Constant,
then
not linear, constant.
Constant. I mean, so f is just constant. Okay,
yeah.
So in that case, I don't know whether that's a special case of your model.
It is a special case of our
It
model.
is a special case. Okay, so you can solve that if you want to look at Nash equilibrium of that game. You can characterize the Nash equilibrium in terms of something called a Q core, and this number Q will be the connectivity. So essentially, you will choose the action if enough of your neighbors choose the action, but enough of your neighbors will choose the action if they have enough of their neighbors choose an action. So that defines this number Q, which will be relating to this cost of choosing the action. Okay, and so that's how you would solve it, and you can look at the maximal equilibrium, and that will be essentially this Q core. Okay, so if you were to think, what could happen
we're
is
talking about Nash implementation, not a unique implementation, right?
no. So so you would have, instead of thinking of getting everyone to do 1, you may want, I was just thinking of a slightly smoother problem where you might get a lot of bang for your buck by just lowering the Q from some number x to x minus 1, and that brings in a lot many more people, you see. So I was just wondering if you had given it some thought, because that might allow you to exploit this Q core structure, in targeting people, and that might lead to a slightly different optimal targeting, and that might appeal to some other applications. Okay. So I think that's sort of the main and more generally, I was thinking about this person, Kylie Jenner. Now, when I sort of follow a product that she endorses, I was wondering whether that's the model you have is the right way to think about, because I might follow things because it's recommended by people like Kylie Jenner.
Yes.
Not because my friends are following it.
No, but okay, so that's something that
it's more about fashion.
That's something that our model is capable to address by having the xi differentials.
Okay.
Right? We assume that you gain 1 from each agent that is taking the action, and then you normalize it through the f. But if instead of xi, if instead of 1, you have xj, which is different across different friends, then you will get something similar to. The thing is that the interesting thing is that even when you don't take this into account, her popularity, okay. And if you ask me, I think what makes her popular, it boils down again to the question how stars become stars. I think stars become stars primarily through the ideas that other people look at them, and I'm going to buy what she's buying because I know that many other people will buy what she's buying. So it's some sort of a focal point, some sort of sunspot that I go according to because I know that many other people will do the same. Okay, but what we are showing is that so maybe she's a spiritual. So we're like in Israel, a rabbi. When a famous rabbi says something, it's not because you know, because he has established himself an authority that people have to follow it, okay? Maybe she has something like that, an authority of that sort. What our model shows is that even without this authority, the main fact that she's connected to many people allow her to be treated better than, substantially better than others.
Okay, yeah, I think I should probably give
More,
space.
more than proportionately to the number of friends that she has compared to others. That's the main issue.
Sure.
Can I interrupt here? We are going to stop recording right now, but of course everyone is welcome to stay and continue the discussion. But officially, let me thank you, Eyal, Vlad, Fernando, and Sanjeev, and all the participants, and see you next week. And please continue discussing, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
If anyone else would like to